I'm Camille, 29 years old, and I just discovered my parents orchestrated the most violating Christmas surprise of my life. Standing here on December 26th, staring at police tape across my cabin door, I can't believe this is real. Broken locks, muddy footprints everywhere, and the stench of stale food and alcohol violating my sanctuary. The security footage revealed everything. 22 uninvited guests had transformed my private refuge into their party venue. Before I continue this shocking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who values your privacy and personal space? If you've ever dealt with family members who don't respect boundaries, this story will resonate deeply with you. Please hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves their own sacred space, and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about standing up for yourself. Trust me, what happens next will leave you speechless about how far some families will go to violate boundaries. My relationship with my parents, Diane and Robert, has always been complicated. Growing up, privacy was a foreign concept in our household. My mother would read my diary and justify it as making sure you're safe. My father would open my mail because family doesn't have secrets. When I got my first cell phone at 16, they installed tracking apps without telling me. Every friendship was interrogated, every decision questioned, every moment of solitude treated as a personal insult to them. The day I turned 18, I moved out with nothing but 2 suitcases and a determination to build my own life. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, limiting contact with my parents to monthly phone calls that always ended with guilt trips about being an ungrateful daughter. "We gave you everything," my mother would wail, conveniently forgetting that everything included zero respect for my autonomy. 2 years ago, my life changed when my grandmother on my mother's side passed away. She'd always been different from the rest of the family, understanding my need for independence. In her will, she left me $75,000 with a note for Camille to find her peace. I knew exactly what to do with her gift. After months of searching, I found the perfect cabin in the Colorado mountains, 6 hours from my parents' home in Kansas. It was remote, peaceful, and most importantly, mine. I never told my parents the address. This was deliberate and necessary. The cabin became my sanctuary where I could work on my freelance journalism without interruption, where I could heal from years of boundary violations, where I could simply exist without performative family obligations. I'd spend weeks there writing, hiking, and discovering who I was without constant criticism and manipulation. The trouble started when I declined Thanksgiving at my parents' house, choosing instead to spend the holiday at my cabin working on a major project. The backlash was swift and merciless. My mother posted passive-aggressive messages on social media about children who abandon their families. "Some people forget where they came from," she wrote, accompanied by photos of empty chairs at their dinner table. My father left voicemails oscillating between rage and manipulation. "Your mother cried all through dinner. I hope you're happy." The flying monkeys came next. Aunt Martha called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Uncle Ted sent texts about family obligations. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my existence long enough to lecture me about respect. I responded to each with the same message: "I'll see everyone at Easter, as we previously discussed. I hope you all had a lovely Thanksgiving." But the pressure didn't stop. If anything, it intensified as Christmas approached. My phone rang constantly with relatives trying to guilt me into hosting Christmas at my cabin. "You have all that space," they'd say, having no idea where my cabin was or what it looked like. "It would be so special," they'd plead, their requests becoming demands. I held firm. "I have work commitments through the holidays. I'll see you all at Easter." Then came the text that changed everything. My cousin Beth, who'd always been the family gossip, sent me a message on December 20th. "Can't wait for the Christmas surprise your parents planned." Oops, wasn't supposed to say anything. When I pressed for details, she went radio silent. My stomach churned with dread. My brother Jake, the only family member I truly trusted, called me that evening. "Something's going on," he warned. "Mom and Dad have been really secretive, making lots of phone calls. They asked me for your cabin address, but I told them I didn't know it." Jake had been my ally since childhood, the only one who understood why I needed distance from our parents. Be careful, Camille. Whatever they're planning, it's big. That's when I made a decision that would prove crucial. I drove to my cabin on December 21st and installed hidden security cameras around the property, all connected to cloud storage. My gut told me I'd need evidence of whatever was coming. After securing the property, I returned to my apartment in Denver, planning to come back on December 23rd for a peaceful Christmas alone. Those 2 days in Denver were tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My parents had gone suspiciously quiet, no more guilt trip calls or messages. The silence was more unnerving than their usual harassment. Even the extended family had stopped their pressure campaign. It felt like the calm before a storm. On December 23rd, I packed my car with groceries, my laptop, and presents I'd bought for myself, including a first edition of my favorite novel. The drive to the cabin usually calmed me, but anxiety gnawed at my stomach the entire way. As I pulled up to my sanctuary, everything looked normal. The fresh snow was undisturbed. The cabin stood quietly among the pines. I spent that evening wrapping presents, making hot cocoa, and trying to convince myself I was overreacting. December 24th started beautifully. I woke to fresh snowfall and decided to drive into town for some last-minute supplies. Batteries for my flashlight, extra firewood, and ingredients for my traditional Christmas morning cinnamon rolls. The town was 45 minutes away, and I took my time, enjoying the festive decorations and cheerful atmosphere. I chatted with the store owner about the weather, bought a few extra supplies, and felt my anxiety finally melting away. The drive back to my cabin shattered that peace completely. As I turned onto my private road, I saw them. Vehicles lined up like a parking lot. My Aunt Martha's distinctive minivan with its "Proud Grandma" bumper stickers. Uncle Ted's massive truck. Cars and SUVs I recognized from every corner of my extended family. My heart hammered as I counted. 8, 9, 10 vehicles crammed onto my private property. I pulled over immediately, backing my car behind a grove of trees where it wouldn't be seen. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and crept through the woods toward my cabin. What I saw made my blood run cold and my anger burn hot simultaneously. This wasn't just a surprise visit. This was an invasion. Crouching behind a cluster of pine trees, I watched in horror as my father wielded a crowbar against my cabin door. The sound of splintering would carry through the cold air as he broke the lock I'd installed specifically to keep people out. My mother stood beside him like a general commanding troops, directing relatives who streamed in and out of my home carrying coolers, boxes of decorations, and wrapped presents. "Careful with that garland, Sandra," my mother barked at my cousin. "We want everything perfect when Camille arrives." The irony of her words while actively breaking into my home would have been laughable if I wasn't so furious. I started recording everything on my phone, making sure to capture clear footage of the break-in, the license plates, and every face I could see. Uncle Ted was already drunk. I could tell by his stumbling gait as he carried cases of beer onto my porch, setting them on the handcrafted bench I'd bought at a local artisan market. Aunt Martha complained loudly about the primitive conditions, apparently upset that my cabin didn't meet her suburban standards. "Doesn't she have a dishwasher?" she whined. "How are we supposed to clean up after dinner?" Children I didn't even recognize ran wild through my yard, throwing snowballs at my windows and screaming. One boy, probably about 10, was trying to climb the old oak tree where I'd hung a bird feeder. Another was poking at my compost bin with a stick. Their parents paid no attention, too busy violating my space to supervise their kids. I circled around to get a better view through the windows, staying hidden in the tree line. What I saw inside made me physically ill. They'd completely rearranged my living room, shoving my carefully chosen furniture against walls to make space for folding tables and chairs. My writing desk, where I'd crafted countless articles, had been moved to the corner like garbage, papers scattered across the floor. My office was destroyed. Months of research for my current project lay strewn about, some pages crumpled, others stained with what looked like spilled drinks. I watched Cousin Beth flip through my personal notebook, reading aloud to her sister while they laughed. Those pages contained my most private thoughts, therapy notes, story ideas. The violation felt like being stripped naked in public. But the worst was yet to come. Through my bedroom window, I saw Aunt Jennifer pawing through my jewelry box, holding up pieces to the light. She pocketed my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones Grandma had worn on her wedding day, the ones she'd left specifically to me. In the kitchen, Uncle Stan was going through my medicine cabinet, reading prescription labels out loud and making jokes about what Camille needs these for. My most prized possession, the quilt my grandmother had made for my college graduation, was being used as a tablecloth. Food stains already marked its intricate hand-stitched patterns. Someone had placed a hot dish directly on it, leaving a dark burn mark on fabric that had taken my grandmother months to create. I bit my hand to keep from screaming. The rage building inside me was volcanic, but I forced myself to think strategically. These people had committed multiple crimes: breaking and entering, theft, destruction of property, and going through my medications was a serious violation. I needed more than just anger. I needed justice. I backed away quietly and returned to my car, making sure I wasn't seen. With steady hands that surprised me, I called 911. "I'd like to report a break-in in progress," I said calmly. "Multiple individuals have broken into a cabin at 42 Whisper Pines Road. I can see them destroying property and stealing items." The dispatcher's voice was professional and concerned. "Are you safe, ma'am? Can you see the intruders now?" "I'm at a safe distance," I assured her. "But there are approximately 20 people, including children. They appear to be having some kind of party with stolen property." I didn't mention yet that I was the owner. I wanted the police to arrive without any preconceptions about family disputes. "We're dispatching units immediately," she said. "Can you stay on the line and update us on any changes?" I agreed, continuing to document everything while updating the dispatcher. More relatives arrived as I watched. 22 people in total invaded my sanctuary, each one complicit in this massive violation. I recognized most of them: cousins who'd ignored me for years, aunts and uncles who only called when they needed something, family members who'd chosen my parents' side in every conflict. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Where are you? Mom's acting weird, says you'll be getting the surprise of your life soon. Please tell me you're not at the cabin." I texted back, "I'm safe. Police are on the way. They broke in, Jake. All of them." His response was immediate. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry. What do you need?" "Just be ready to tell the truth," I typed. "This ends today." 20 minutes later, I heard sirens in the distance. The sheriff's department didn't mess around with B&E calls in rural areas. 3 patrol cars wound up the mountain road, their lights flashing through the trees. I stayed hidden but moved closer to witness what would happen next. The first deputy to exit his vehicle was a tall woman who looked like she meant business. She surveyed the scene, cars everywhere, clearly a party in progress, and the broken door visible even from the driveway. She spoke into her radio, likely calling for backup given the number of people involved. Inside the cabin, I could see panic starting to spread as someone noticed the police cars. My mother rushed to the window, her face going pale. My father tried to look authoritative as he walked toward the door, but I could see his hands shaking. The party atmosphere evaporated instantly, replaced by chaos and confusion. The deputy knocked firmly on the broken door frame. "Sheriff's Department. We've received a report of breaking and entering. Everyone needs to come outside immediately." My father opened what was left of my door, trying his salesman's smile. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. This is my daughter's cabin. We're family." The deputy's expression didn't change. "Sir, do you have permission to be on this property?" "Well, she's our daughter," my mother chimed in, pushing past my father. "We don't need permission to visit our own daughter." "Actually, ma'am, you do," the deputy replied. "Do you have written permission or a key provided by the owner?" The silence that followed was deafening. Other relatives started spilling out of MY cabin, looking confused and worried. Uncle Ted tried to hide his beer behind his back like a teenager. Aunt Martha clutched her purse, the one I'd seen her stuff with items from my bathroom. That's when I decided to make my entrance. I walked out from the tree line, my phone still recording, and approached the deputies. Officers, I said clearly, my name is Camille Richardson. I'm the owner of this property, and none of these people have permission to be here. The look on my parents' faces was almost worth the destruction of my sanctuary. Almost. My mother's face cycled through emotions like a broken slideshow: shock, confusion, anger, and finally, the familiar mask of manipulation. Camille. Darling. We wanted to surprise you. She rushed toward me with open arms, but I stepped back, keeping the deputies between us. Surprise me by breaking into my home? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. I turned to the lead deputy. Officer, I'd like to press charges for breaking and entering. As you can see, they broke my lock to gain entry. I pointed to the splintered door frame where my father's crowbar work was evident. My father's salesman persona kicked in immediately. Now, Camille, let's not be dramatic. This is just a family misunderstanding. We thought you'd be happy to have everyone together for Christmas. His tone suggested I was a child throwing a tantrum rather than an adult whose home had been criminally invaded. Sir, the deputy addressed my father, did you break this lock? Well, we couldn't get in touch with her, and we drove all this way. My father's excuses trailed off as he realized he was admitting to the crime. I pulled out my phone, showing the deputy my security app. I have video footage of the entire break-in, including him using a crowbar on my door. I also have footage of theft and property destruction inside. The deputy's eyebrows rose with interest as she called for additional units. This is ridiculous. Aunt Martha shrieked. We're family. You don't call the police on family. She clutched her purse tighter, and I noticed her trying to subtly move toward her minivan. Officer, I said clearly, that woman has items from my cabin in her purse. I saw her take jewelry from my bedroom, including pearl earrings that belonged to my deceased grandmother. The deputy who'd been watching the crowd moved to block Aunt Martha's path. Ma'am, I need you to stay where you are and open your purse. This is harassment. Martha wailed, but she had no choice. When she opened her purse, there were my grandmother's earrings, along with a silver bracelet and my prescription anxiety medication. The deputy's expression hardened as she saw the pill bottle. These are controlled substances, she said. Ma'am, you're under arrest for theft and possession of stolen prescription medication. As she read Martha her rights, my aunt's face turned purple with rage. Camille Marie Richardson, my mother screeched, using my full name like she had when I was in trouble as a child. You stop this nonsense right now. How dare you humiliate your family like this? I ignored her, instead addressing the growing crowd of relatives who'd stumbled out of my cabin. Every single one of you participated in a crime today. You broke into my home, destroyed my property, and stole from me. I have it all on video. Uncle Ted, still obviously intoxicated, decided to make things worse for himself. You uppity little witch. After everything this family's done for you. He lunged toward me aggressively, but the deputies were ready. Within seconds, he was on the ground in handcuffs, charged with drunk and disorderly conduct and attempted assault. More patrol cars arrived, along with a crime scene unit. I gave them access to my security footage, which clearly showed the entire break-in from multiple angles. The lead deputy's expression grew more serious as she watched my father break down my door while my mother directed the invasion like a criminal mastermind. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, she said formally, you're both under arrest for breaking and entering, conspiracy to commit burglary, and destruction of property. The looks on their faces as they were handcuffed was a mixture of shock and indignation. This is your doing. My mother spat at me as they led her to the patrol car. You've destroyed this family. All we wanted was to spend Christmas with you. No, I replied calmly, you wanted to violate my boundaries one more time. You wanted to prove that my no doesn't matter, that my privacy means nothing, that you own me and my space. Well, you're wrong. Inside the cabin, deputies were documenting the destruction. I walked them through everything, my voice breaking only when I showed them my grandmother's ruined quilt. She made this by hand. It took her 6 months. It's irreplaceable. The burn mark on the fabric seemed to mock me, a permanent reminder of my family's disrespect. The children, witnessing their parents and grandparents being arrested, were crying. I felt sorry for them. They were innocent in this, victims of their parents' poor choices. Child Services was called to ensure they'd be cared for while their parents were processed. My cousin Beth tried to slip away unnoticed, but I called out, "Officer, that woman was reading my private journals and has photos of them on her phone." Sure enough, when they checked, she'd taken pictures of my most personal writings, including therapy notes about family trauma. She was detained for investigation of identity theft and invasion of privacy. As they cataloged the damage, the scope of destruction became clear. Beyond the broken door and scattered belongings, they'd found my laptop missing from my office, later found in Uncle Stan's car, my manuscript pages used to start a fire in the fireplace, medication bottles opened and pills missing, food smeared on walls in what looked like a child's tantrum, and personal photographs torn from frames. The senior detective pulled me aside. "Ms. Richardson, this is one of the most severe family-related BNE cases I've seen. The premeditation, the number of conspirators, the destruction, you have a very strong case here. I recommend you also file for restraining orders against all involved parties." I nodded, feeling oddly numb as I watched my extended family being processed by law enforcement. Some were arrested, others detained for questioning. Those who could prove they'd arrived after the break-in and hadn't participated in the destruction were released with trespass warnings. Jake arrived just as they were loading my parents into separate patrol cars. He'd driven 3 hours after my text, and the horror on his face when he saw the scene was genuine. "Camille, I'm so sorry. If I'd known they were planning this." "Did you know they hired a private investigator to find my cabin?" I asked, having overheard my mother admitting this to another relative. Jake's face went white. "What?" "No, they what?" The betrayal in his voice matched my own. I knew they were upset about Thanksgiving, but hiring a PI? Breaking in? This is insane. The lead deputy approached us with an evidence bag. "Ms. Richardson, we found this in your father's pocket." Inside was a copy of my lease agreement from my Denver apartment, several photos of me taken without my knowledge, and printouts of my social media posts I'd thought were private. The violation ran deeper than just today. As the last patrol car pulled away with my parents in custody, I stood in my destroyed sanctuary with Jake beside me. The silence was deafening after hours of chaos. My safe space, my refuge, my grandmother's gift to me, lay in ruins because my family couldn't accept a simple no. "What happens now?" Jake asked quietly. I surveyed the damage, feeling the weight of what this meant. This wasn't just about Christmas dinner or hurt feelings. This was about a lifetime of boundaries violated, of my autonomy dismissed, of my no's treated as suggestions. Today, that pattern ended. "Now," I said, pulling out my phone to call a lawyer, "I make sure they learn that no means no, even from family. Especially from family." Within hours of the arrests, my phone exploded with notifications. Apparently, cousin Sandra had gone straight to social media with her version of events. Camille had her entire family arrested on Christmas Eve. Elderly parents in handcuffs. Children traumatized. Is this really who she is? The post, complete with crying emojis and a photo of my parents in the patrol car, went viral within our extended network. The flying monkeys descended in full force. Messages flooded in from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all parroting the same themes. "How could you? Family doesn't do this to family. Your parents just wanted to see you. You've ruined Christmas forever." Some were more vicious, calling me heartless, mentally ill, suggesting I should be ashamed of myself for traumatizing the children. My phone rang constantly. When I didn't answer, they moved to emails, then Facebook messages, then Instagram DMs. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who lived in Florida, left a voicemail that perfectly captured the family's response. "I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Your mother is sitting in a jail cell on Christmas Eve because you're too selfish to spend the holidays with family. You need professional help, Camille. This isn't normal. Normal people don't call the police on their parents." What they didn't mention in their tirades, the broken door, the theft, the destroyed manuscript, the violated privacy, or the fact that I'd explicitly said no to hosting anyone. In their narrative, I was an ungrateful daughter who'd overreacted to a loving gesture. The truth was inconvenient to their victim's story. But not everyone joined the attack. Jake became my fiercest defender, posting the security footage on Facebook with a detailed explanation. Since everyone seems confused about what happened, here's the truth. Our parents broke into Camille's home. That's a crime. They stole from her. That's a crime. They destroyed her property. That's a crime. Camille protected herself and her property legally. If you have a problem with that, examine why you think family is a free pass to commit felonies. His post sparked a civil war in our extended family. Comments flew back and forth, some supporting me, others damning me. The footage was hard to argue with. There was my father, clear as day, breaking down my door while my mother directed the operation. Yet some relatives still defended them. They just wanted to surprise her. She drove them to this by being so distant. Then Great Aunt Ellen called. At 83, she was my grandmother's younger sister and had watched our family dynamics for decades. Camille, honey, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Her voice was firm despite her age. Your mother has been pulling this crap since she was young. Did you know she once broke into my house to redecorate while I was on vacation? Claimed she was helping. I came home to my furniture rearranged and family heirlooms missing. She never told me that, I said, stunned. Of course not. She never tells anyone about the consequences of her actions. Your grandfather made me drop the charges to keep the peace. I've regretted it ever since because she never learned. You're doing what I should have done 40 years ago. Ellen's call opened floodgates. Cousin Marcus reached out privately. I'm sorry I was there. Mom guilted me into coming, said it would be a fun surprise. I should have known better. When I saw your dad with that crowbar, I tried to leave, but Mom took my car keys. 2 other cousins, sisters Anna and Deb, sent similar apologies, admitting they'd been manipulated and expressing horror at what they'd participated in. Meanwhile, my parents had posted bail and immediately violated the no-contact order. They showed up at my Denver apartment at 2 in the morning, banging on the door and screaming, "Open this door right now, young lady. We need to talk about this insanity." My father bellowed. I called 911 again, recording everything. They were arrested again, this time for harassment and violating a protective order. Their lawyer, some aggressive attorney named Kirkwood, started a campaign of legal intimidation. Letters arrived threatening to sue me for defamation, emotional distress, and elderly abuse. Your parents are respectable members of their community, one letter read. Your malicious prosecution has damaged their reputation and caused severe emotional trauma. I forwarded everything to my attorney, Sarah Winters, a former prosecutor who specialized in family law. This is classic Darvo, Sarah explained. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. They're trying to make you the bad guy to avoid accountability. Keep documenting everything. Their harassment is actually strengthening our case. The investigation revealed more disturbing details. The private investigator my parents hired had been stalking me for weeks, taking photos, following me to work, even attempting to access my medical records. The PI, facing his own charges, revealed that my parents had paid him $5,000 to find everything about Camille's life, especially the cabin. Financial investigations uncovered attempts to access my bank accounts. My mother had gone to my old bank branch in Kansas, claiming to be me and saying I'd lost my ID. Fortunately, the teller was suspicious and refused, but security footage showed the attempt. Identity theft charges were added to the growing list. Uncle Ted's family hired a separate attorney and tried to blame alcohol for his behavior, but his blood alcohol level and the assault attempt made that defense weak. Aunt Martha, facing drug charges for stealing my prescription medication, tried to claim she thought they were vitamins. The fact that the bottle clearly stated alprazolam and had my name on it undermined that defense. But the social damage continued. I lost freelance clients after my mother called them, claiming I was mentally unstable and dangerous. She told my biggest client that I'd been hospitalized for psychosis and couldn't be trusted with deadlines. It took letters from my attorney threatening defamation suits to stop her campaign, but the damage was done. 3 clients quietly ended our contracts. My relationship with Ryan suffered under the strain. He supported me but struggled with the intensity of the situation. I knew your family was difficult, he said during one late-night conversation, but this is like a crime syndicate. I'm getting threatening messages from people I've never met, telling me to convince you to drop the charges or they'll ruin my business too. Some family members escalated beyond nasty messages. My tires were slashed in my apartment's parking garage. Dead flowers were left at my door with notes saying, "This is what you've done to the family." Someone created a website called The Truth About Camille Richardson, filled with lies about my mental health, claims of drug abuse, and fabricated stories of me abusing my parents. But for every attack, support emerged from unexpected places. My landlord, after seeing the security footage of my parents at 2 a.m., offered to testify about their harassment. Former classmates who'd witnessed my family's behavior growing up reached out with their own stories. A support group for adult children of narcissistic parents welcomed me with open arms. Jake's wife Sarah became one of my strongest allies. "I've watched your parents manipulate and guilt-trip you for the 5 years I've been with Jake," she told me. "They tried to convince him to leave me because I supported your boundaries. This needed to happen." As winter turned to spring, the family divided into clear camps. Team parents consisted of those who benefited from the family dysfunction, who enjoyed the drama, or who feared becoming targets themselves if they didn't comply. Team Camille included those who'd experienced similar violations, who believed in accountability, or who simply thought breaking into someone's home was wrong regardless of family ties. The middle ground evaporated. You were either for calling the police on criminal behavior, or you were for letting family do whatever they wanted because blood is thicker than water. There was no nuance in their world, no acknowledgement that both things could be true. They were family and they committed crimes. My therapist helped me process the grief underneath the anger. "You're not just losing the family you have," she explained. "You're grieving the family you needed them to be, the parents who would have respected your boundaries, the relatives who would have asked before visiting. This is complicated grief." She was right. Beneath my fierce determination for justice was a deep well of sadness. Every nasty message reminded me that these people chose loyalty to dysfunction over basic respect for me. Every flying monkey attack proved that I was right to maintain distance, but being right didn't make it hurt less. The legal bills mounted, but I was fortunate that the criminal cases were handled by the state. The civil lawsuit I filed for damages would take longer, but Sarah was confident. "The evidence is overwhelming. The question isn't if you'll win, but how much they'll have to pay." Some relatives tried to negotiate. "Drop the charges and we'll pay for the damages," Uncle Roger offered, as if this was a business transaction. "Let's handle this within the family," others suggested, the same family that was currently cyberstalking and harassing me. I refused all offers. This wasn't about money or even the cabin anymore. This was about a lifetime of boundaries violated, about teaching consequences to people who'd never faced them, about protecting myself and potentially others from future violations. Every relative who'd been too scared to stand up to my parents was watching. Maybe my actions would give them courage. As spring arrived and court dates loomed, the family fallout showed no signs of healing. But something had shifted in me. The girl who used to apologize for having boundaries was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to defend it, even against those who claimed to love her most. Just when I thought my parents had hit rock bottom, they grabbed shovels and started digging. Their new attorney, Kirkwood, launched an aggressive campaign that made their previous harassment look like child's play. The first salvo came in the form of a competency petition filed with the court, claiming I was mentally unstable and needed a conservatorship for my own protection. "They're trying to have you declared incompetent," Sarah explained, her voice tight with anger as she reviewed the filing. "They claim you've shown signs of paranoid delusions, that calling the police on family indicates severe mental illness, and that you need psychiatric intervention." They even got 2 distant relatives to sign affidavits supporting their claims. The affidavits were from cousins who'd never spent more than 5 minutes talking to me at family gatherings. Yet somehow they felt qualified to attest to my supposed mental deterioration. One claimed I'd seemed withdrawn at a funeral 3 years ago. Another said I'd refused family help, which was apparently a sign of paranoia rather than healthy boundaries. My parents' campaign went beyond legal channels. They contacted my employer directly, sending a formal letter expressing concern about my mental state and suggesting I might be a danger to myself or others. Attached were edited versions of my private therapy notes that Beth had photographed, taken completely out of context. A line about feeling anxious became proof of instability. A mention of setting boundaries became evidence of antisocial behavior. Fortunately, my editor, Janet, had worked with me for 5 years and saw through their manipulation. "Camille, this is clearly harassment," she said, showing me the letter. "I'm forwarding this to our legal department. You might want to add defamation and tortious interference to your lawsuit." But the damage rippled outward. Other clients received similar letters. My parents created a twisted narrative where they were concerned parents trying to help their mentally ill daughter who'd turned violent and unpredictable. Some clients asked uncomfortable questions. Two quietly declined to renew contracts. My income dropped by 40% in 2 months. The sheriff's department, meanwhile, had uncovered disturbing patterns in their investigation. Detective Morrison called me in to review new evidence. "We've found previous reports," she said, sliding folders across the table. "Your father's sister filed a restraining order 15 years ago after he broke into her house to retrieve what he claimed was family property. It was dismissed when she didn't show up to court." "Aunt Jennifer never told anyone that," I said, shocked. "There's more. Your mother has a history of complaints filed against her by neighbors, coworkers, even her own siblings. Harassment, trespassing, theft of personal items she claimed were hers. Most were dropped or settled quietly. Your family has been terrorizing people for decades, Ms. Richardson. You're just the first to follow through." The detective showed me reports going back 20 years. My mother breaking into her brother's house to take back a gift she'd given him years earlier. My father threatening a neighbor who'd asked them to keep noise down during one of their parties. Complaints from 3 different extended family members about stolen items after family gatherings, all dropped when family pressure mounted. "We also found something interesting about that private investigator," Detective Morrison continued. "This wasn't his first job for your parents. He'd been investigating family members for years. Tracking down estranged relatives, gathering information for manipulation, even investigating potential romantic partners of family members. The violation ran deeper than I'd imagined. How many family members had been stalked without knowing it? How many relationships had been sabotaged with gathered intelligence? How many people had been manipulated with information they didn't know my parents possessed? Their escalation took a darker turn when they tried to access my medical records. My doctor called, alarmed, to report that someone claiming to be my healthcare proxy had requested my complete psychiatric history. They had a forged document, Dr. Martinez explained. "We didn't release anything, but I wanted you to know. This is serious medical identity theft." Then came the financial attacks. Despite changing all my passwords and alerting my banks, someone managed to open 3 credit cards in my name, maxing them out immediately. The applications used information only my parents would know: my first pet's name, my childhood address, my mother's maiden name they'd convinced me to use as security questions for family consistency. While dealing with identity theft, I discovered they'd been systematically contacting everyone in my life. College friends received messages about my supposed mental breakdown. Former coworkers got emails suggesting I'd been fired for instability. They even found and contacted Ryan's family, spinning tales of my violent tendencies and suggesting he was in danger. Ryan finally broke under the pressure. "I can't do this anymore," he said during what would be our last conversation. "Your family is insane, and they're making my life hell. My business is suffering, my family is frightened, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I'm sorry, Camille, but I need to step away from this situation." I couldn't blame him. My parents had successfully destroyed another relationship, adding to their long list of victories. But something had changed in me. Instead of devastation, I felt resolve. They'd taken enough. This ended now. Sarah filed additional charges: identity theft, fraud, cyberstalking, criminal harassment, and defamation. The FBI got involved due to the interstate nature of some crimes and the cyber elements. What started as a breaking and entering case had evolved into a complex criminal enterprise investigation. Extended family members who'd initially attacked me started facing their own consequences. Cousin Sandra, who'd posted the viral social media attack, found herself sued for defamation after my lawyer proved she'd knowingly spread false information. Uncle Roger, who'd been harassing my former clients, received cease and desist orders and faced potential charges for interfering with business relationships. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Aunt Patricia called one night, drunk and rambling. "You think you're so smart," she slurred. "You have no idea what your parents have on everyone. The files, the photos, the recordings. They've been building leverage for years. Why do you think everyone always does what they want?" "What are you talking about, Patricia?" "The safe in their basement. Files on everyone. Dirt, secrets, photos. That's how they control us all. But you they couldn't control anymore. So they had to destroy you." I immediately informed my attorney and the detective. A search warrant was issued for my parents' house. What they found confirmed Patricia's drunken confession. Filing cabinets full of dossiers on family members, recordings of private conversations, photographs taken without consent, financial records that weren't theirs, and detailed notes on how to manipulate specific relatives. My file was the thickest, dating back to my childhood. Every defiance, every boundary attempt, every independent decision was documented with notes on how to regain control. The most recent entries detailed the plan for the cabin invasion, including psychological profiles of which relatives would be most useful and how to manipulate them into participating. The discovery changed everything. This wasn't just about a Christmas break-in anymore. This was about a systematic pattern of control, manipulation, and abuse spanning decades. Other family members began coming forward, sharing their own stories of blackmail and coercion. The cousin who'd been forced to lie in court about his mother's abuse to protect family secrets. The aunt who'd been threatened with exposure of an affair if she didn't comply with demands. The uncle who'd paid thousands in hush money to keep business improprieties quiet. My parents had built an empire of fear and control, ruling the family through intimidation and information warfare. The cabin break-in wasn't an isolated incident of boundary crossing. It was the latest move in their long game of domination. They'd simply chosen the wrong target this time, someone who'd found the strength to say no and mean it. As more relatives found courage to speak up, the investigations expanded. What had started as my parents facing charges for breaking and entering had snowballed into potential RICO violations, extensive fraud, and organized harassment. The FBI agent assigned to the case told me they'd seen crime families with less sophisticated operations. Some relatives still defended them, too deep in the manipulation or too afraid of what might be exposed to break free. But their numbers dwindled as evidence mounted and consequences became real. The family empire my parents had built on fear and secrets was crumbling, and they had only themselves to blame. Through it all, I focused on healing and rebuilding. My cabin became a crime scene, then a construction zone as I repaired the damage. But every fixed door, every restored room, every security upgrade was a declaration I would not be driven from my sanctuary. They could escalate all they wanted, but I would not back down. The girl who'd once apologized for existing had become a woman who stood firm against an army of flying monkeys and emerged victorious. Not unscathed, but unbroken. And that, more than any legal victory, was the ultimate triumph. The criminal trial began on a surprisingly warm April morning. I sat in the prosecutor's section, my hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. Across the courtroom, my parents sat with their attorney, looking smaller and older than I remembered. The months of legal battles had worn them down, stripping away their facades of respectability. District Attorney Rebecca Chen opened with devastating precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't a case about family disputes or holiday gatherings gone wrong. This is about premeditated breaking and entering, conspiracy to commit burglary, organized harassment, and a decades-long pattern of criminal behavior disguised as family dynamics. The security footage played on large screens, showing every moment of the break-in in high definition. My father with the crowbar, my mother directing traffic like a criminal mastermind, relatives streaming in and out with my belongings. The jury watched in rapt attention, some visibly uncomfortable as children ran wild through my sanctuary. When Detective Morrison took the stand, she methodically presented the evidence. The hired private investigator's testimony proved particularly damning. Under immunity agreement, he detailed how my parents had paid him to stalk me, hack into my accounts, and gather intelligence for their invasion. His records showed payments totaling $15,000 over 6 months, all for surveilling their own daughter. They specifically asked me to find vulnerabilities, he testified. Times when she'd be away from the cabin, its layout, security weaknesses. Mrs. Richardson said they needed to, quote, teach her a lesson about family loyalty. Jake testified on my behalf, his voice cracking as he described years of watching our parents' manipulation. They've always treated Camille like property, not a person, he said. When she started setting boundaries, they escalated. I tried to warn them this was wrong, but they said family doesn't need permission. The defense's strategy relied heavily on painting me as mentally unstable and cruel. Kirkwood cross-examined me aggressively, trying to provoke an emotional response. Isn't it true, Ms. Richardson, that you've cut off most of your family? That you refuse normal family interactions? I refuse to have my boundaries violated, I replied calmly. I refuse to be stalked, robbed, and manipulated. If that's what you consider normal family interaction, then yes, I refuse it. He presented the edited therapy notes, trying to use my own mental health journey against me. But our attorney was ready, presenting the full context and calling my therapist as an expert witness. Dr. Kumar testified that my responses to family trauma were healthy and appropriate, that setting boundaries was a sign of psychological strength, not illness. The tide turned completely when the prosecution presented the basement files. Box after box of evidence showing my parents' systematic control over the family through blackmail and intimidation. Several relatives testified under subpoena about being coerced into participating in the cabin invasion through threats of exposure or financial manipulation. Cousin Marcus, granted immunity for his testimony, revealed, they told me if I didn't come, they'd tell my employer about my bankruptcy from 10 years ago. They had documents I thought were destroyed. They said they'd ruin my career if I didn't help bring Camille home for Christmas. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. As they filed back in, I held Jake's hand, feeling the weight of the moment. The forewoman stood, her voice clear and firm. On the count of breaking and entering, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit burglary, guilty. On the count of organized harassment, guilty. On the count of identity theft, guilty. On the count of cyber-stalking, guilty. The list continued. Guilty on all charges for both parents. My mother sobbed theatrically, while my father stared at me with undisguised hatred. But their tears and glares had lost their power. They were no longer the omnipotent controllers of my childhood, but criminals facing consequences. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, Honorable Patricia Winters, didn't mince words. Mr. and Mrs. Richardson, you've shown a breathtaking disregard for the law, for your daughter's autonomy, and for basic human decency. Your actions weren't momentary lapses in judgment, but part of a calculated campaign of control and harassment. The court must send a clear message that family relationships don't exempt anyone from criminal law. My mother received 2 years in federal prison with 3 years supervised probation. My father got 18 months with 3 years probation. Both were ordered to pay restitution and undergo mandatory psychological counseling. Permanent restraining orders were granted, prohibiting any contact with me for life. The extended family members faced their own consequences. Aunt Martha pled guilty to theft and prescription drug charges, receiving 6 months jail time and 2 years probation. Uncle Ted got 90 days for assault and drunk and disorderly conduct. Others received probation, community service, and restraining orders. The civil trial moved faster with the criminal convictions established. My attorney presented extensive documentation of damages, the destroyed manuscript representing months of work and lost income, therapy costs for trauma treatment, security upgrades necessitated by their stalking, moving costs when I had to relocate from my compromised apartment, and the complete reconstruction of my cabin sanctuary. The jury awarded me $50,000 in actual damages and $100,000 in punitive damages. But more importantly, the verdict established legal precedent that family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior or override personal boundaries. Not everyone faced legal consequences, but social justice proved equally powerful. Cousin Sandra's employer terminated her after her defamation conviction. Uncle Roger's business suffered when his harassment of my clients became public. Several relatives found themselves ostracized from their communities when their participation in organized crime became known. The family dynamic shifted dramatically. Those who'd lived under my parents' control for decades finally felt free to cut contact. Support groups formed among cousins who'd suffered similar manipulation. Aunt Jennifer, freed from my father's threats, finally told her story publicly and reconnected with her own children whom my parents had helped alienate. Great-Aunt Ellen attended every day of the trial, her presence a quiet but powerful support. After the sentencing, she hugged me tightly. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she whispered. "You did what generations of us couldn't. You stood up to them and won." Some relatives tried to maintain relationships with both sides, but the restraining orders made family gatherings impossible. The family split permanently. Those who supported accountability and those who still believed family meant no consequences. Holiday celebrations, reunions, and milestones would forever be separate events. But from the ashes of the old toxic dynamic, something new emerged. Jake and I grew closer than ever, building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligatory connection. We started hosting small gatherings for the relatives who'd chosen growth over dysfunction. These meals were filled with genuine laughter, not the performed happiness our parents had demanded. Ryan reached out after the trial concluded, apologizing for leaving when things got hard. I appreciated his honesty, but recognized we couldn't rebuild what my parents had destroyed. Some casualties of their war couldn't be undone. But I was learning to accept that not all losses were defeats. The victim impact statement I'd written, but ultimately didn't need to read, captured my journey. You raised me to believe that family meant accepting any treatment, that love meant no boundaries, that saying no was betrayal. But real love respects autonomy. Real family honors boundaries. Real connection doesn't require breaking and entering. Thank you for teaching me, through your negative example, exactly what love isn't. That knowledge freed me to discover what it truly is. As I left the courthouse for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. Justice hadn't erased the trauma or restored what was destroyed, but it had validated a fundamental truth. Everyone deserves safety and respect, especially from those who claim to love them. My boundaries weren't suggestions or starting points for negotiation. They were valid, enforceable, and finally protected by law. 6 months after the trial, I stood in my rebuilt cabin, running my hand over the new door frame. Solid oak, reinforced steel deadbolts, and a security system that could rival a bank's. But the real security came from within, from knowing I had the strength to defend my space and the law's support when I did. The restoration had been more than physical repairs. Every design choice reclaimed my sanctuary. Where they'd broken my grandmother's quilt, I'd commissioned a local artist to create a memorial piece incorporating the salvageable fragments. The burned section became the center of a new artwork titled Beauty from Ashes, now hanging prominently in my living room. My office, once ransacked and violated, became a temple to my work. New bookshelves held copies of the articles I'd written about family trauma, boundaries, and healing. The manuscript they'd destroyed had been rewritten, stronger for having survived the fire. Sanctuary, a memoir of boundaries and belonging, would be published next spring, with pre-sales already exceeding expectations. The healing wasn't linear. Nightmares plagued me for months, always variations of the same theme, them breaking in again, the law failing me, being trapped in their control. Dr. Kumar helped me process not just the recent trauma, but decades of conditioning that made me doubt my right to safety and autonomy. Your parents programmed you to believe that their wants superseded your needs, she explained during one breakthrough session. The fact that you recognize this and fought back is remarkable. Many people never escaped that programming. I joined a support group for adult survivors of narcissistic abuse. Hearing others' stories validated my experience, while their healing journeys inspired my own. We called ourselves boundary warriors, and together we learned that setting limits wasn't cruel, but necessary for survival. The group included a woman whose mother had sold her belongings while she was at college, claiming family shares everything. A man whose father had opened credit cards in his name as a child, destroying his credit before he turned 18. A woman whose sister had worn her wedding dress to her own party, insisting sisters don't have secrets. Each story reinforced that violating boundaries wasn't love but control wearing love's mask. Jake and I instituted monthly check-ins, building the healthy sibling relationship we'd never been allowed to have. Without our parents' triangulation and manipulation, we discovered genuine friendship. His daughter, born during the legal proceedings, would grow up knowing that Uncle Camille's house required invitations and that no meant no, even from family. I dated cautiously, alert to red flags I'd previously ignored. When Marcus, a fellow writer, casually mentioned showing up at my cabin uninvited would be romantic, I ended things immediately. When David respected my need for space during a deadline, accepting I need to be alone this weekend, without argument or guilt trips, I knew I'd found someone worth knowing better. David understood boundaries because he'd fought for his own against an invasive family. Our relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect rather than intensity. When I finally invited him to the cabin, he waited for explicit permission before touching anything, even books. "This is your sanctuary," he said simply. "I'm honored to be welcomed here." The financial settlement allowed me to quit freelancing for publications that had dropped me during the harassment campaign. Instead, I launched a blog about surviving family abuse that quickly gained traction. Readers shared their own stories, finding hope in mine. Sponsors approached, but I carefully vetted each one, refusing any who pushed family reconciliation at any cost narratives. Speaking engagements followed. Universities, women's centers, and abuse survivor conferences invited me to share my story. The first speech terrified me, but seeing audience members cry with recognition and relief made it worthwhile. After one talk, a young woman approached me. "I'm driving home from college right now to file charges against my brother," she said. "Thank you for showing me it's possible." Not everyone understood my choice to maintain no contact. Well-meaning acquaintances suggested forgiveness, reconciliation, and being the bigger person. "They're still your parents," they'd say, as if DNA excused felonies. I developed a standard response. "They're also convicted criminals who violated my home and person." Both things can be true. The letters came monthly at first, forwarded through lawyers since direct contact violated restraining orders. I returned them unopened, maintaining the boundary even in their absence. Eventually, they stopped, whether from acceptance or simply running out of commissary funds for stamps. Other relatives reached out seeking reconciliation. Some genuinely apologized, acknowledging their complicity and respecting my need for distance. Others wanted to rug sweep, to pretend the trials never happened and resume dysfunctional patterns. I engaged with the former, blocked the latter, and learned to distinguish between authentic accountability and manipulation wearing remorse's mask. 2 years after that horrible Christmas Eve, I hosted my first holiday gathering at the cabin. 6 people attended, Jake and his family, Great-Aunt Ellen, and 2 cousins who'd testified against my parents. We established new traditions based on consent and joy rather than obligation and performance. Everyone asked before hugging. No one commented on food choices. When Ellen grew tired, she simply said goodnight without anyone guilting her to stay longer. Watching snow fall outside those reinforced windows, I reflected on the journey. The girl who'd been trained to apologize for existing had become a woman who owned her space unapologetically. The sanctuary violated had been restored stronger. The family lost had been replaced with chosen connections based on respect rather than blood. My story became part of a larger conversation about family abuse and accountability. Legal scholars cited the case in arguments for stronger stalking laws. Therapists used it to illustrate that family violence extends beyond physical abuse. Survivors found courage in knowing someone had faced their worst fear, total family rejection, and not only survived but thrived. The cabin stood as more than my sanctuary now. It was a symbol that boundaries could be defended, that violation had consequences, and that healing was possible even from the deepest betrayals. Every peaceful morning with coffee on the porch, every productive writing session in my restored office, every gathering of chosen family who respected my space was a victory. Real love doesn't break down doors, I'd written in my memoir's final chapter. It knocks and waits for permission to enter. It accepts no as a complete sentence. It celebrates your autonomy rather than seeking to destroy it. If someone must break into your life to be part of it, they've already shown you they don't deserve to be there. The book ended with hope, not for reconciliation with those who'd violated me, but for everyone struggling to claim their right to space and safety. Your sanctuary is sacred, I wrote. Whether it's a physical space like my cabin or the emotional boundaries that protect your peace, you have every right to defend it. Family, history, guilt, and manipulation tactics don't override your fundamental right to safety and autonomy. Sometimes the greatest act of love, for yourself and even for them, is enforcing consequences for violations. May you find the strength to build your boundaries and the courage to defend them. May your sanctuary, whatever form it takes, remain forever yours. Looking back, I sometimes wondered how different life might have been if they'd simply respected my no that Thanksgiving. If they'd accepted my boundaries rather than plotting to violate them. But that wondering was brief. They'd shown me who they were through decades of smaller violations. The break-in was simply their most dramatic revelation of a truth I'd always known but hoped to deny. In their eyes, I wasn't a person but a possession. Their crime freed me from that delusion and gave me the gift of clarity. Now, in my sacred space, surrounded by chosen family who knocked before entering, I finally knew peace. The price had been high, paid in lost relationships, legal bills, and nights of trauma-induced insomnia. But the reward was priceless. The knowledge that I deserved respect, the strength to demand it, and the support to enforce it. As snow began falling on another Christmas Eve, 2 years after the invasion that changed everything, I raised my mug of cocoa in a toast to boundaries defended, justice served, and sanctuaries preserved. Somewhere in federal prison, my parents might be planning their next manipulation. But here in my cabin, behind reinforced doors and legal protections, their reach had finally found its limit. And that limit was me. What boundaries have you had to defend in your own life? Have you ever faced pressure to abandon your limits because family doesn't do that to family? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experience might be the encouragement someone else needs to stand firm in their own boundaries. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about surviving family dysfunction and building healthy relationships. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their boundaries matter, that family isn't an excuse for criminal behavior, and that choosing safety over toxic relationships is not just acceptable but necessary. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May your own sanctuaries remain sacred, and may you always have the strength to defend them.